In southern Vermont, northeast of Bennington, lies a vast, beautiful, yet mysterious area of backcountry. It's approximately 36 square miles of unbroken wilderness with 12 peaks over 3,000 feet in its mountain range. The area is encapsulated by the Green Mountain National Forest. The forest itself is incredibly dense and supports a variety of wildlife including beavers, moose, coyotes, black bear, white-tailed deer, wild turkeys and ruffed grouse. The forest has also been referred to as the state's granite backbone due to the sheer amount present. It is this area where we can find the Bennington Triangle. On the outskirts of the Bennington Triangle lies the town of Glastonbury. Glastonbury was originally charted in 1761 by Benning Wentworth, who was the governor of New Hampshire. The town didn't officially settle until the 1800s, but it was doomed from the start. The dense and rough terrain made the area dangerous and difficult to develop. The short growing season didn't ease the settlers' struggle either, and the town would later become officially disorganized by the State of Vermont in 1937. But as the years went by, the obscure small town, whose population peaked at 241, came to the forefront when the inexplicable events that happened on its doorstep began to circulate. And in 1992, the legend of the Bennington Triangle was born. Author and folklorist Joseph Citro first coined the term and stated that the area was the most haunted area of Vermont. But the strangeness didn't start with Joseph, nor the town. The Native Americans spoke of the land being cursed and refused to travel anywhere near the mountains within the now known Green Mountain National Forest. The Native Americans would speak of those who went before them who would vanish in the area and never return. They also speak of a completely bizarre legend, an enchanted stone that wanders the mountain range, which opens up and swallows a person whole if they venture too close. The strangeness and the tales didn't stop even many years into the future when the town of Glastonbury was formed. Early accounts would report hearing odd noises and odours that would resonate from the mountains. Outside of the Native American accounts of strangeness, in the early 19th century saw possibly the earliest report of something out of the ordinary in the area. Two horses were guiding a stagecoach full of passengers down a very remote dirt path near the mountains. The night was very dark and brief lightning strikes were illuminating the sky every so often. But the darkness, coupled with the heavy downpour of rain, made visibility very poor and the driver was forced to stop. He said that he hopped down from his perch and tried to assess the route forwards by illuminating the area with his lantern, but while doing so, noticed massive footprints across the mud that led up into the mountains. It's said that the horses became very upset and were behaving wildly, as if they were fearful of something nearby. The driver was afraid that whatever caused the tracks may be nearby. The rest of the group huddled together in the darkness until the storm passed. This would begin the legend of the Bennington Monster. Later, in 1867, there was an alleged, now famous Wildman sighting whereby the locals would state that the mountains had driven him mad, as his behaviour was said to be erratic. 25 years later, in early April of 1892, would see the mill worker Henry Mcdowell end the life of John Crawley with the use of a large rock. When found, Henry kept repeating that the voices in his head wouldn't leave him alone. 5 years later, residents heard the screams of 40-year-old John Harbour coming from a remote area just south of Glastonbury. The locals mounted a search but wasn't able to locate him until 11 AM the following morning. They said that when he was found, it appeared that he had been moved. They also said that he had his hunting gear on him and had been moved up against a tree. They never found who was responsible. That is not where the strangeness ends. The first disappearance took place in November of 1945. Middy Rivers, a 74-year-old, highly experienced hunter, went missing whilst out on a hunting trip with a group of 4 companions. At the time, the group were in the mountain wilderness near Glastonbury Mountain, and after a successful hunt, the men retreated to their camp. As the group were heading back, they made use of the trail road area near the US Route 9. Middy, who was the most experienced of all the hunters present and who knew the area better than anyone else, always led the group. At the time, Middy had strayed just a bit past the group and he was never seen again. One of his companions said that it was like he just vanished. After trying to catch up to Middy and realising that he had gone, the men started to call out for him, but they never got a response. They began searching the area and were left baffled because they couldn't find any trace of him and they couldn't even figure out in which direction he'd gone. The authorities were brought on scene and they conducted their investigation and the area was scoured as a result. This search would find a single shell that belonged to Middy next to a small stream. It's said that the authorities, volunteer hunters and searchers alike were all left perplexed after the search concluded and they found no further trace of him. Middy was an incredibly gifted outdoorsman and he was very familiar with the area in question. One theory speculated that he may have fallen into the stream and perhaps a lone shell fell out of his pocket and next to the stream. The group he was with didn't believe that this was the case, but admitted that they didn't have a better explanation. Middy Rivers nor any of his belongings were ever found. The second disappearance would take place exactly 1 year and 1 month afterwards. This is the Bennington Triangle's most infamous unsolved disappearance and one that is still written and spoken about today. The date was December the 1st, 1946 and began like most others for Paula Weldon, who was 18 years old when she disappeared. Paula was in her second year of college at the time. Paula was said to be a very friendly, enthusiastic and motivated person and would often take more shifts at the school's dining hall to earn some more money. This is precisely what she did on the day of her disappearance. After her second shift in the dining hall ended, she returned to her room on campus and spoke with her roommate, Elizabeth Johnson. The pair were said to be very good friends, and while Elizabeth remained studying in their room, Paula said that she was finished with her studies and that she was going to go for a long walk. At the time, according to Elizabeth, Paula changed into a distinctive red coat with a fur collar, jeans and some lightweight sneakers. She left in this gear at 2:45 PM and it was perhaps not ideal for the cold weather outside. It wasn't snowing that day, but the temperatures were set to be below freezing by night. As said, and as many have pointed out, she seemed underdressed. Some speculate that perhaps she was only planning to be out for a short time, but she did tell Elizabeth that she was going for a long walk. Shortly after Paula had set off, she was seen by Danny Fager, who owned a local gas station just across the street from the college gates. Danny recalled some odd behaviour that Paula displayed on her way out. Near the college entrance was a gravel pit, and Paula climbed up it and then ran back down before going out of view. I'm not entirely sure where the gravel slope leads, but I get the feeling it led onto a field. Perhaps she climbed up to get a better view of the area for some reason, or wanted to see what was beyond the gravel, it's not clear. At 3 PM, 15 minutes after setting off, she was seen again, this time by a Lewis Knapp who picked up a hitchhiking Paula on Route 67, which was also not far away from the college entrance. It's worth mentioning that this may not have been Paula, but his description fit her perfectly, so the authorities strongly believed that he had picked her up. She told Lewis that she wanted to go to the long trail on Route 9, so Lewis parked on his driveway, which was in the direction of the start of the trail but was still a good walk away. Apart from asking to go to the long trail, the only other words spoken between the pair was Lewis telling her to be careful. She thanked him for the ride and went on her way. She was seen again at 3:45 PM by Ernie Whitman, and some of the residents of the Bickford Hollow area who said that she was travelling in the direction of the trail. Ernie told her that she shouldn't be travelling into the mountains with her clothing and that it was going to get dark soon, but she ignored the advice and went on into the woods and was never seen again. As it started to get dark, Elizabeth was worrying back at college but felt too nervous to tell the college authorities as she felt that she might be causing a scene for no reason. However, when she still hadn't heard from Paula the following morning, she alerted the college, who then contacted her parents. Paula's parents made them aware that she simply hadn't come home to visit them and immediately began to panic. In fact, it stated that Paula's mother collapsed from shock and was bedbound as a result of the fall. Her father, on the other hand, Archibald, was heading 160 miles from his home in Stamford, Connecticut, to Bennington. At the time, the state of Vermont didn't have its own state police force, so it was up to her father to assemble a search force. He arrived and quickly did just that. The community came together and many volunteered to join the search. The college shut down so that all students could participate in the search for Paula. After searching all day on the 2nd of December, the students said that the search was being led incompetently by some of the community members and told Archie this. Archie was an influential engineer at the time in Connecticut and had contacts in the police force and used his influence to call in the state police from New York and Connecticut. Vermont state investigator Almo Franzoni took charge of the investigation and was now organising the search effort with the help of the outside state police. The area was scoured, volunteers and police scoured on and off the trail, and they never found a trace of Paula. Some leads did come up. For instance, one young woman said that she had served someone matching Paula's description in Fall River, Massachusetts, but nothing ever came of this. Archie quickly sped off to follow up on this lead without telling anyone, which some found suspicious. Ultimately though, on the 16th of December, the search was called off. Archie gathered his daughter's belongings from the college and returned home to Connecticut. He heavily criticised the disorganized search effort, and after lots of bad press, the state created its own police force in 1947. Almost 73 years later now, and no trace of Paula has ever been found. This is not where the mysteries of the Triangle end. 3 years after Paula's disappearance, 68-year-old James Tedford, often referred to as the man who seemingly vanished into thin air, seemed to do just that. James was born in 1884 in Vermont, and not much is known about his early life. But in 1940, he lived in Fletchertown, located in Vermont. It's not clear when he married, but in 1940, James was 55, while his wife Pearl was 28. James was also in active service during the events of the 1940s, and after the war had ended, he returned home. However, upon arrival, he learned that Pearl had vanished and no trace of her was ever found. It's unclear if Pearl had simply up and left him, but she didn't leave any signs of that, and as far as I can tell, her belongings were still at the property. It's worth mentioning that Vermont's state police force still didn't exist until 1947, so it's unclear what kind of effort was put into locating her. But James's family said that the last time they saw her was near the Amoco store in Franklin, but unfortunately I couldn't find a date. James never really got over the loss of his wife, and in 1947, because of loneliness, he checked himself into a soldier's home in Bennington where he spent much of his time. Fast forward 2 years, and this is where reports of James's disappearance get bizarre. Towards the end of November in 1949, James was finishing up with a trip to see his family in St. Albans in Vermont. Afterwards, he boarded a bus to return home to Bennington. This is a trip that would normally take approximately 8 hours, but weather conditions on the day caused a substantial delay as heavy snow hit the area. This particular route passed through the Green Mountain National Forest. On that day, 14 passengers, including the driver, all testified to seeing James on the bus, sitting at the back by himself, sleeping in his seat. But when the bus reached Bennington, James was no longer on the bus, and not a single passenger saw him get off. A few days afterwards, on the 1st of December, James's family reported him missing. Thankfully, the police force in Vermont did exist at this time and an investigation was conducted. All present on the bus were questioned by police, and it was stated that the general consensus was that he was still on the bus during the final stop before Bennington. Because of this, police came to the conclusion that James had gone missing somewhere between Bennington and the prior stop, but weren't sure how. What was even stranger about this was that all of James's belongings was still on the luggage rack, and his bus timetable was still on the seat. Like all prior disappearances, James never came back and he was never found. 10 months later, in October of 1950, an 8-year-old boy by the name of Paul Jepsen went missing. Paul and his family lived on a farm located at the base of Glastonbury Mountain. His mother last saw him playing by himself nearby the home while she left to tend to their pigs. But when she returned, Paul was nowhere to be seen. The police were notified and they converged on the area with bloodhounds in an effort to track him down. Authorities were very confident that they would find the lost boy as he was wearing a highly visible, bright red jacket, but the search still failed. At some point during the search, the bloodhounds did pick up Paul's scent and followed it to a nearby highway close to the mountain, but that's where the trail ended. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search, but Paul was never found. Police theorised that he must have been taken by someone passing on the highway, but while the search was ongoing, they were optimistic that he might have just lost his way. When questioned as to why Paul might have wandered off in that direction alone, his father said that Paul was always very fond of the mountains and was drawn to them, and because Paul liked to go there, he would take him for trips there. But ultimately, Paul was never seen again, and as far as I can tell, there were never any suspected sightings. This was also around the area where Paul was suspected of vanishing those 4 years prior. It was only 16 days before the next disappearance, which took place on the 28th of October 1950. 3 days after the fact, the Berkshire Eagle reported this: in Somerset, Vermont, searchers were stumped today in their hunt for Mrs. Frida Langer, 53, of North Adams, Massachusetts. Mrs. Langer disappeared Saturday while hunting with her husband and a cousin. No trace of the woman has been found since she vanished in the wilderness near Lake Somerset. It's worth pointing out at this stage that Lake Somerset is well within the borders of the Green Mountain National Forest. They continue. 2 helicopters and a plane from Westover Air Force Base took part in the search yesterday. The Army plane landed on Somerset Reservoir to allow its crew to search the shore. The reservoir area was checked on speculation that Mrs. Langer might have toppled into the water 150 feet from her camp occupied by her cousin and her 58-year-old husband Max. Some 50 men, including state troopers and game wardens, discontinued the search at dusk last night. They plan to resume today. Mrs. Langer's husband offered a $100 reward today to anyone who finds her. He also appealed for new volunteer searchers in the belief that the time is running out for a successful search. Maurice Leonard, the caretaker of a reservoir near the scene of the woman's disappearance, said after a flight in a helicopter that he was certain Mrs. Langer was not in the hardwoods area. Interestingly, the Berkshire Eagle did miss some details which perhaps makes the disappearance even stranger. At the time of her disappearance, Frida, Max and her cousin Herbert were actually with a small group of friends. I'm not sure how many were present on this particular hike, but Herbert and some other friends were. As the group were walking through the wilderness, Frida slipped and fell into a stream. She wasn't injured and she had a good laugh about it, but she was soaked and decided to retreat to the camp to change. Herbert said that he would wait for her at the stream and their friends went on. This was still fairly close to the campsite. An hour had passed and Frida hadn't returned to Herbert, which made him grow worried, so he made the trip back to the camp. He asked the group where Frida was, but they hadn't seen her, meaning that she can't have made it back to the camp. The group gathered together and began to search the area, but there was no sign of her at all. It was after this failed search that they contacted the authorities, who arrived and conducted 5 extensive searches over the following 2 weeks. They brought in helicopters, dogs, military support, but even together with many volunteers, they never found anything. They couldn't even determine which way she might have gone. Searchers present understood that this was unusual. Frida disappeared in broad daylight with a clear path back to the camp. Frida's outdoor experience was unquestionable, and she was considered an experienced outdoorswoman who spent much of her life camping and hiking through many wilderness areas, including this one. This case was somehow different to those that occurred before it, however, as something very unusual happened just short of 7 months later. So let's get bizarre. On the 12th of May, 1951, Frida's body was discovered in full view in an open clearing near the Somerset Reservoir, which was an area that had been extensively searched during the initial disappearance. The cause of her passing could not be ascertained, which was also not helped because of the decomposition. This posed a very strange and serious question. How did the body get there? Was it placed there? Did she somehow manage to reach that spot after evading the searchers? It's worth mentioning that the dogs searched this area and never once found a scent there or in the surrounding areas. This was the only disappearance in which a body was ever found. So what happened? Did she simply get lost despite being very close to the camp with a clear path? There were no signs of a struggle, no one heard any screams or anything of that nature. This was one of those completely bizarre disappearances that left everyone involved baffled, and no one knew what truly took place that day. There were a couple of other disappearances that took place around the time too, though not as much information exists as compared with those discussed so far. Martha Jones disappeared on the 6th of November 1950. Her parents thought that she had run off with her boyfriend, but the boyfriend said that he hadn't seen her. A massive search was conducted around the Glastonbury area and nothing ever turned up. Just shy of a month afterwards, Frances Chrisman went missing on December the 3rd. Locals were still tense about all of the disappearances that took place prior, and this one didn't help to ease the panic that was setting in. At the time, Frances was on her way to visit a friend who lived approximately half a mile away from her. However, she never made it to her destination. Another search was organised by authorities and nothing was ever found. Many theories have been discussed over the years. Some believe that there may have either been a person or a group of persons out in the wilderness that were doing this to people, while others, including author Joseph Citro, believe that there was some sort of strange energy that inhabits the Bennington Triangle area that may have something to do with the disappearances. I found an interesting post on Reddit by someone with the username Cosmo7 who said this. For years I lived in the area and hiked around Glastonbury quite a bit doing nature photography. Often I would go off trail to get a good photo. There was a uniqueness to the area that I liked, and the history of the abandoned town made the area feel out of place somehow. There were a few old Mohican mounds in the area too. I was not too aware of the Bennington Triangle stories though, so did not feel creeped out by that. I did feel creeped out by the men that lived on the mountains, in little shacks, or in the winter, elaborate snow houses. They lived off the grid, self-sufficient, no bills to pay, etc. I knew of 2 brothers that would come down the mountain to visit the bar every month or 2 and to stock up on supplies. They were vague as they didn't want to be found, but said that they would hike between 10 to 20 miles to a car parked at a friend's garage on the road near the hills. They'd come to town, visit the bar, get what they needed and would head back up. They would point out areas not to hike as there were other people like them on the mountain, only they would rarely come down and are best avoided. Though they said that they would only be found if they wanted to be found. The poster then said that she only camped a few nights in those hills, but the fear that she had set up camp 50 yards from one of these guys prevented her from sleeping well. In the end, no one really knows what took place in that area. Was it down to not so well-intentioned individuals living off the land, or perhaps someone very opportunistic who was doing this? Or was it something else entirely? After all, the native people did believe it to be a cursed place and spoke of their own disappearances, and a mysterious rock that would take people who ventured too close. What do you think? Please do leave a like if you liked the video, or a dislike if you didn't. Feel free to share your honest opinion. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of you that have subscribed to the channel and who share these videos. I appreciate it a lot and I can't thank you enough. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to my patrons. Your support is massively appreciated, so thank you very much to those who have signed up. Anyway, do let me know what you thought of this one, and you'll find all of the links in the description below. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me a lot. I hope that you have a great day, or evening depending on where you are. Be safe guys, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.